You got this, you got this. Let's learn tonight.
Hi, I'm Hallie. Welcome to You Got This. Today we're talking about how to have difficult conversations. At some point, everyone has one. Could be with your partner, your family member, friend, or even someone at work. If you've ever worried about saying the wrong thing, you're not alone. Most of us were never taught how to have these conversations, but the good news is it's something we can all learn. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Today, we'll look at some simple ways to prepare, stay calm, and say what needs to be said with confidence and respect. By the end of this video, you'll have some practical ideas to help you handle difficult conversations a little more confidently. But first, let me ask you something. Does this sound familiar? There's something that needs to be said, but today doesn't feel like the right day, and tomorrow doesn't either. The conversation keeps going around and around in your mind. Maybe it starts while you're out driving or lying awake in bed. Part of you wants to speak, but another part worries what might happen. So you stay quiet. Then later, there's that feeling, I wish I'd said something. If that sounds familiar, you're certainly not alone. Why are difficult conversations so hard? Most of the time, it's because we care. We don't want to upset someone, we don't want an argument, or we worry about saying the wrong thing, or we even worry that the other person might not understand us. Sometimes it feels easier to stay quiet and hope the problem will go away. If you've ever felt like that, you're not alone. Most of us have. But here's something to think about. When we're upset, it's easy to think that the other person is the problem. What if we looked at it another way? What if we asked, what problem are we trying to solve? That one question changes everything. Instead of blaming each other, we can start looking for an answer together. And that's what this lesson is all about. It's toolbox time. Now it's time to open today's toolbox. Inside are 5 tools to help you have difficult conversations. These tools aren't about winning, and they're not about proving you're right. They're about helping people understand each other and solve a problem together. Let's have a look. First, we'll learn how to understand the real problem. Then we'll look at choosing the right time to talk. We'll learn how to stay calm. We'll talk about how to explain how you feel without blaming the other person. And finally, we'll look at the most important tool of all, listening to understand. You don't have to get everything right. Even using 1 or 2 of these tools can help a conversation go much better. So let's open today's toolbox. Before you have a difficult conversation, stop for a moment and think. Ask yourself one simple question. What problem are we trying to solve? When we're upset, it's easy to think about what the other person has done. But before you start talking, try looking at the whole picture. Maybe you're feeling tired. Maybe you're doing too much. Or maybe you need some help. Or even maybe something's gone wrong between you. When you know what the real problem is, it's easier to talk about it. Remember, the goal isn't to blame the other person. It's to find a solution together. When you start there, it's much easier to have a good conversation. Now let's look at our second tool. Choose the right time. The time you choose can make a big difference. If someone is tired or busy or upset, they may not be ready to listen. If you can wait for a quiet time, it is so much better. Choose a time when you can both sit down and talk. Put your phone away, turn off the TV, and give each other your undivided attention. If you're feeling angry, it can help to wait until you feel calmer. You're not avoiding the problem, you're just choosing a better time to talk. Remember, the right time makes talking easier. It gives you both a chance to listen to each other and to understand and find a solution together. Let's look at our third tool, stay calm. This can be hard if you're upset. You might feel angry, you might feel hurt, or you might feel frustrated. But if you both start shouting, it's much harder to solve the problem. If you feel yourself getting upset, slow down. Take a slow breath. Speak a little more slowly. If you need to, it's okay to stop for a few minutes. You could say, let's take a short break. How about we make a coffee and come back in a few minutes? Sometimes the short break is all you need. When you come back, you may both feel calmer and ready to talk again. Remember, staying calm helps people listen. And when people listen, it's easier to understand each other and find a solution together. Our fourth tool, explain, don't blame. When people feel blamed, they often stop listening. Instead, help them understand what's happening to you. Talk about your own experience. You could say, I've been finding it hard to keep up with everything at home. Or, I'd really like us to spend more time together. These words don't blame the other person, they explain how you're feeling. That makes it easier for the other person to listen. When you can talk about the problem together, and together you can look for a solution. Remember, you're not trying to prove who's right, you're trying to help each other understand. That's how good conversations begin. And our fifth tool and final tool is listen to understand. Sometimes we're just so busy thinking about what we're going to say next that we don't really listen. Good listening means giving the other person your full attention. Look at them. Put your phone away. Let them finish before you answer. And don't rush to interrupt. When they've finished, you can check that you've understood correctly. You could say, so what I hear you saying is, or have I understood you correctly? That gives the other person a chance to say yes, or explain a little more. Remember, listening doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. It means you're trying to understand the other person's point of view. When both people feel heard, it's much easier to work together and find a solution. Let's put it all together. We've learnt 5 simple tools. First, understand the problem. Ask yourself, what problem are we trying to solve? Next, choose the right time. Find a quiet time when you can both talk. Then stay calm. If you need to, slow down or take a short break. After that, explain how you feel without blaming the other person. Help them understand what's happening for you. And finally, listen to understand. Give the other person time to speak too. Listen carefully, then check you understood. You could say, have I understood you correctly? When you use these 5 tools together, difficult conversations become easier. Remember, good conversations are not about winning, they're about working together to solve the problem. The more you practice these tools, the easier they become. Let's look at a real life example. This is Helen. Lately, she's been finding it hard to keep up with everything at home. She's not looking for an argument. She just wants to talk about how she's feeling and to see if they can work things out together. If you were Helen, what would you do? Think about the 5 tools we've learned. What's the problem? Is this a good time to talk? How can Helen stay calm? How can she explain how she's feeling without blaming anyone? And how can she listen if the other person has something to say? Take a moment to think about what you would do. Then, in the next slide, we'll see one way Helen starts the conversation. Here's one way Helen could start the conversation. Helen says, "Can we have a chat? I've been finding it hard to keep up with everything at home." Now it's your turn. If you were the other person, what would you say? Take a moment to think before you answer. Remember the 5 tools you've just learnt? How could you show Helen that you're listening? What could you say to her to help her feel heard? Pause the video for about 8 seconds and think about your answer. When you're ready, press play again and we'll look at some possible responses together. Here's one possible response. The other person says, "Of course, I'm glad you told me. Can you tell me a bit more about what's been making things so hard?" Notice what they didn't do. They didn't interrupt. They didn't become defensive. They didn't try to solve the problem straight away either. Instead, they listened. They showed Helen that she mattered by asking a gentle question. They gave Helen the chance to explain a little more. Sometimes feeling heard is the first step towards solving a problem. So Helen explains a little more. She says, "It's the washing, the cleaning, looking after Mum, and trying to get everything done on time." Now the other person understands the problem more clearly. Instead of arguing, they say, "Oh, that sounds like a lot to handle. Let's think of some ways I can help. What would make things easier for you?" Now they're talking together. They're taking turns to speak. They're listening to each other and they're sharing ideas. And they'll agree on a plan. Remember, difficult conversations aren't about winning. They're about understanding each other and finding a solution together. Let's take a moment to think about what we've learnt today. We started by learning how to begin a difficult conversation calmly. We learned to listen with care, to explain how we feel without blaming anyone, and to work together to find a solution. Remember, the goal isn't to win. The goal is to understand each other and solve the problem together. Now think about your own life. Is there a conversation you've been putting off? How could you start it? How could you show the other person that you're listening? Here's my challenge for you. Choose just one of the 5 tools we've learned today. Use it in a real conversation this week. You don't have to be perfect. Every small step helps. And every conversation is a chance to learn. You've got this. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope this lesson has helped you feel a little more confident about having difficult conversations. Remember, you don't have to get everything right. Just start with one small step. Choose a good time. Stay calm. Explain how you feel without blaming anyone. Listen to understand and work together to find a solution. Better conversations can build better relationships. If you found this lesson helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might find it helpful too. If you'd like to support my work, you can also buy me a coffee. You'll find the link below and also in the description of this video. Thank you again for being here. Stay tuned for my next video about how to handle criticism. Until next time, take care of yourself. You got this.